As I was getting ready to do this video, I definitely had some tips I wanted to share with you on how to prepare as you enter your PhD program. But then I decided to go on LinkedIn and ask my amazing community what advice they would give to somebody that was starting a PhD, and they delivered. If you want to read that whole thread, I'm going to leave the link to that LinkedIn post in the description. But in today's video, this is what we're doing. We're talking about 7 ways to get prepared for graduate school. So the first thing is to realize that grad school is very different from your undergrad. In undergrad, for the most part, we read our books, we went to class and listened and took notes, and then we would be evaluated through exams. Even if you had projects, it would still be based on the knowledge that you had essentially studied in class. In graduate school, this is not the case. Whilst there is a part of grad school where you are in the classroom and you will take exams, for the most part, it's research-based. And because it's research-based, more than likely, you will be working in a field, or you'll be working on a research question that maybe only you are working on in the entire world, right? So as a PhD student, you really are a pioneer in an area of knowledge. You may be able to read articles and other people's writings to gain an understanding of the general field and to gain an understanding of what questions have been answered before you. But really, you are the one who is breaking ground on this new area of knowledge. And so coming from undergrad, if you're so used to like pumping out A's, okay, I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously, that's why you've gotten into grad school. You did really well. You've shown that you're really good at, imbibing material and being evaluated on that material. But grad school is different in that sense. Grad school is not regurgitating information that you have heard in class. It really is application of knowledge and breaking new ground. And if you don't accept that from the beginning, grad school can feel very disappointing and very demotivating and frustrating. But understanding that from the beginning sets the expectation, and since it sets the expectation, it makes you better prepared. The second tip I was going to share with you guys that was also stated on that thread so beautifully by Sammy here is the fact that it's important for you to get some kind of book, article, or citation management system. So here's what we mean by that. So if in your PhD, right, in your PhD, not if, but in your PhD, you're going to be reading papers, you're going to be reading articles, you're going to be gathering all that information, synthesizing that information, and using some of that as a basis for the questions that you will be exploring. Now, the thing is that, because you'll be reading so many papers and so many articles, it's important to have some kind of way to organize all that information so that if you needed to go back, let's say you're preparing a presentation and you need to cite an article, you can just go back to that management system, find that particular article that that you're thinking about, and then cite that. The way that I did it somewhat in grad school was I had a notebook, and essentially when I would read papers, I would summarize what I learned from that paper or what they did in that paper in my notebook. I would even go ahead and print the first page of the paper and maybe cut the title as well as the names of the authors, sometimes the abstract, and then paste that in the notebook with glue, and then make my own notes to remind me of what I had read in that article. And that notebook became very important to me. So that was my very, very paper and pen system. But nowadays there's so many tools out there like Notion, like Evernote, like Google Docs that allow you to better organize that digitally, and then it becomes easy. Usually some of these tools are also searchable, so if you just typed in, with my notebook system, if I was looking for something, I'd have to like open all the pages, but with all these other digital tools, they're pretty searchable, so you could just type in a particular author or a particular idea that you had read in that paper, and then it pulls it up for you and it becomes easier. But get an article, book, citation management system for yourself early on. This third one here, absolutely agree with it, that it's important that you have some kind of exercise and self-care routine going, because grad school is hectic. And grad school can be frustrating sometimes. And like I said earlier on, it can be demotivating, because when you are studying a completely new area of study, you'll face roadblocks and you'll face difficulties, right? And so having some kind of activity that actually supports your bodily and mental health is absolutely important. That's actually one of the tips that somebody else had shared about mental health. Mental health, taking care of your mental health is absolutely important during grad school. And again, this is something that I personally wish I knew and was aware of, even though I think I took fairly good care of myself whilst I was in grad school. I went to grad school in Philadelphia and I walked a lot. So I got my exercise in somehow, by walking, because you had to go catch the train and you had to go catch the bus and so on and so forth. So I tended to walk quite a bit. So I took care of that. But I wish that somebody had told me that I would go through certain types of frustrations and that it would be okay to maybe seek mental health counseling or to talk to somebody who could help me. I wish that somebody had told me that. So I'm telling you that as you prepare to go to grad school, realize that it is important to take care of your body and your mind, because you're going to need both of those things in order to excel at your pursuit of philosophical knowledge. Another piece of advice that I thought was so good and which I really want to emphasize on is that you belong in your PhD program. So I did this video where I was talking about imposter syndrome and my experience with imposter syndrome during grad school and during my postdoc. And I want to say that imposter syndrome is real. Thankfully, at the time I was really going through the deep troughs of imposter syndrome, I was able to talk to my PI and he reassured me and he really spoke with me that day about the fact that, when you go to grad school, you may be surrounded by people that always publish in journals like Nature and Science and Cell and whatever the high-tiered journal is in your specific field. In my field, these are like the top gun journals, right? And you may feel like your article in the Journal of Infectious Diseases doesn't measure up. But the reality is not all of us are going to publish in those high-tier journals, but all of us can contribute knowledge to that body of work, to that body of knowledge. And realizing that in your own small way, you're contributing knowledge with the research that you're doing, you're contributing valuable knowledge, even if that's just a sentence in a whole textbook, is amazing, because all of those sentences have come from people like you and I who have worked over hundreds of years to come up with this knowledge. And so your contribution to your field does matter, and you should absolutely not compare yourself to somebody else's journey. And again, this is another place I wish I was clear on. You belong in your PhD program. When you applied to the PhD program, the admissions committee, or you applied to your postdoc, whoever was going to pick the person or people for that particular program saw something about your resume and said, hey, this is a good person to have. When you went for those interviews, obviously you impressed somebody. And so they gave you a chance to enter the program. The fact that you are in that program means you deserve to be there. And as long as you're doing your best with what you have and what's available to you, you're fine. And if you can contribute something to your field, then that's great. But getting stuck in I don't belong here because of ABC is absolutely something to avoid. So I can't overemphasize this enough. I think I did a good job at this. Finding work-life balance is important. Okay, so as much as PhD is serious business and you should be serious about it, and it's hard work and you will have some long days and long nights, it's important to realize that your life outside of academia and outside of your research is equally as important. And with the point I made earlier about having a solid exercise and self-care routine, which is a tip that the community had shared, yes, absolutely. Your life also is some kind of self-care, right? So I talked about this video, I talked about how I balance having a baby with a PhD. And, I dare say, do we have to choose? Do we have to choose one over the other? I understand those who have chosen one over the other, but if you don't want to choose one over the other, that's okay too. And so I think it's okay to have a life and have a baby and have kids, and still pursue your PhD as you do your very best in that program, right? And so to that point, I think it's really important that when you're choosing your PIs, and I know that in some instances, some PhD students don't get to choose who their advisor is. So this may not apply, but when you're choosing your advisor or your PI, it's important to think about or choose pick the people that allow you to do that. I know I was in a program where sometimes some of the PIs did not give their people vacations because they said Saturday and Sunday was enough vacation. And I think that that's callous, because we work 52 weeks in a year. Sometimes we have a few days off here and there. And so just giving people a week or 2 weeks off, they shouldn't have to beg for that. And so I was kind of glad I wasn't in an environment like that, but there were people who were going through that. And so when you speak to the students in the lab, or you rotate through the labs, or rotate through different advisors and realize that there are folks like this, I say avoid them unless you're about that life, unless you're about not taking vacations and all that. If you're about that life, hey, kudos to you. But definitely, I know that I needed to have at least a week off during the year to recoup from being in a lab and being in one environment every single day all year long, at least 300 and something days a year. I needed 7 days off, So realizing that work and life can be balanced or can be managed. I don't think balance is a word. Balance is a good word for this, but can be juggled is important, and it will be important to your sanity. So planning for that and working around that is important. Now, a tip somebody had shared that I thought was amazing is this tip right here. And the person says, start thinking about your next step from day one. And I agree with the person. I agree with them. And here's the thing, no pressure, okay? Yes, you have about 5 to 7 years to be in your PhD program and gain all these valuable skills so that you can apply that to the work world. Absolutely. But I think that it's important for you to also create a career plan for yourself and begin to really think about where you want to go at the end of your PhD. The reason why you want to do this is because you want to begin to gain those valuable skills that will allow you to enter into those specific professions. So if you realize that you don't want to be a PI, like I didn't want to be a PI, I immediately began to look for other opportunities outside of being an academic researcher, right? And I found, to my surprise, right, that there were so many areas. And so if you don't look and if you don't research, you won't know. And if you don't prepare for it, you won't know. So the moment I realized that, for instance, I would love to teach, or I'd love to get into scientific writing, I began to connect with or find resources that will help me and get me prepared to be on those paths. Yes, it takes a few years. Yes, it might take a few years. It doesn't always take a few years, but whilst you're in your PhD program, gaining some of that experience, shadowing people, having informational interviews, speaking with people about their areas of work, and so on and so forth, is going to be so valuable, and it's going to give you insight and skills that if you just went through your PhD program thinking, okay, I don't know what I want to be, I'm just going with the flow, don't just go with the flow. That's what I have to say. Don't just go with the flow. Really think about the end goal and begin to gather resources and build connections that will help you get to that place. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And why haven't you commented? Let me know in the comments below if you found this video helpful, and if you did, then make sure to share it with somebody else.